All right, here we go. So moving right along. I know that there's one person in the group that I will be delighted to hear. We're moving on to the second Mishnah.
Wow. We're racing. But I don't want to hear racing.
Just kidding. No, we still have plenty. No, I'm not. No. Yeah, we'll move on to the second Mishnah.
It's all good.
Wait a minute. We didn't talk about making a fence around the Torah. We have to stay with the first Mishnah.
No, we did. You may have.
Did we?
You may have turned aside at that point, but we did.
One of the fences about the Torah that we have to make is that when people start getting like murderously angry that we're not moving forward, it's probably safer to move forward than to continue discussing certain things. So yeah. All right. So what I do want to say about those three guidelines. I mean, it is significant that they're in that first Mishnah. It is significant that they are posited as being really original guidelines for what meant to be Rabbinic Judaism in its development. So I would suggest that we keep these things in mind and see if they come into play in some of the other kinds of teachings that we encounter. And that'll give us a chance to talk about them later as well. So the second Mishnah. So who's going to volunteer to read this second Mishnah? Please read it very slowly, because we don't want to rush.
I'll read it.
All right.
Simon the Just. Oops, someone else is reading.
No, that's your echo. Somebody else, maybe because I'm on whatchamacallit, but there's an echo because I'm going to.
Hey, should I read it?
Yeah.
Simon the Just was one of the last survivors of the Great Assembly. He used to say, upon three things the world is based: upon the Torah, upon divine service, and upon the practice of charity. Okay,
great. So some of you may have had in front of you slightly different translations, and there are different things here to look at. First of all, there's an identification here for Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon, the righteous one. Simon the righteous, so Simon the just, was one of the leftovers, one of the survivors of the Anshe Knesset Agdola. It's a pretty intriguing kind of identification to think about. Like, what does that mean? What happened to the Anshe Knesset Agdola that he's a survivor of that? He's one of the leftovers. Shiarei means left over from it, or one of the remnants, one of the remnants of the Anshe Knesset Agdola. So it's a tantalizing kind of identification, but doesn't give us really any information about what might have happened. What we do know is that the Anshe Knesset Agdola disappears. The Anshe Knesset Agdola as an institution, no longer, when we get into real historical documents, contemporaneous to the 2nd century BCE and following into the 1st century BCE and then the 1st century CE, there is no Anshe Knesset Agdola. So there's something called a Jerusia, and then later on the rabbis talk about a Sanhedrin. But the ruling body called the Men of the Great Assembly actually has no historical records on its own. We don't have anything from the 400s BCE, dug up by an archaeologist that talks about the Anshe Knesset Agdola. It just, this kind of like lost in the mists of time. But we do have this person, Shimon HaTzadik, except that we may not. Shimon HaTzadik is the name of apparently 2 different people who lived at 2 different times. So there's a question about what is our dating of this particular individual, and the note that I have in my edition, Hyman Golden's, it has not been definitely established whether this refers to Shimon the First from about 280 BCE or his grandson Shimon II, who lived around 200 BCE. So there is a legend, though, about this Shimon HaTzadik, that he lived even earlier at the time of Alexander the Great. And he is given credit as stopping Alexander the Great from marauding through Judea in his path to world conquest. He was on his way east to India. And as he came through Judea, the legend is that he was going to, despoil it as he did everything else and take over. And Shimon HaTzadik was not simply a tzaddik, but he was the high priest. And he walked out to greet Alexander and his vanguard army in full regalia, in all of his beautiful costume as the high priest, with the breastplate and the jewels and so on, and his crown. And the legend is that he had such an aura about him that Alexander the Great fell off his horse, so to speak, and said, "This is a holy man. This is a vision of God that I've been given." And he said, "Okay, I'm bypassing this territory and I'm going further." And from that point on, Alexander became a Jewish name. So children that were born after that magnanimous gesture by Alexander the Great were named in his honor. And Alexander, which is a Macedonian Greek name, a Hellenistic name, entered into the Jewish name base. So whoever this man is, Shimon HaTzadik, he's not given all of those stories here, so we don't know exactly who he is, but he's a survivor. He represents that last glorious remnant of some mythical, beautiful, spiritual, era. So then he says something that is famous from an Israeli song, Al Shlosha Devarim, Al Shlosha Devarim, on three things, Al Shlosha Devarim, Ha'olam Omeid, Al HaTorah, V'al HaAvodah, V'al Gmilut Chasadim, etc. So Ha'olam is the world, and Omeid, we have translations. Sarita, what was your translation again?
Let's see.
On three things.
The world is based.
Okay, so on three things is the world based.
Rather than standing, right? It should be standing, though.
So the word omeid literally means to stand. But I talked a little bit about the word imadi in Torah Sparks, to stand or to be a pillar. So to be a support, just like a pillar supports a building or supports something that's on top of it, a statue or something. So the pillar can be the base that lets something stand, a pedestal or something like that. So we have literally the word standing. Some people translate it exists, the world exists, but it means that the world depends on these three things. Without these three things, the world would not continue to exist. So on the one hand, talking about the world sounds like we're talking about a very universalist concept. How universalist then is the list that he gives us, the three things that he gives us. By the way, threes are a big thing, right? So if you look at the previous Mishnah, let's go back to Mishnah 1. There was a lot of things we didn't talk about in Mishnah 1. One of the things, just half joking, one of the things is they said three things. Each of the three things that they said consists of three words, right? Hevu metunim badin, ha'amidu talmidim harbe, asu siag laTorah. So there's these threes, and we're going to see that threes are a big deal in the entire chapter here. He says there are three things that the world stands on. The first one is Torah. Okay, so that we have to appreciate is an amazing claim, right? If we see Shimon HaTzadik as the earlier one who encountered Alexander, or even if we see Shimon HaTzadik as the later one after Alexander, the whole idea of a world has been opened up for everybody, right? The Hellenistic civilization broadened the horizons of everyone so that you no longer could think that the world was only your little town or your little country. The world was a big, 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 big place, and encompassed many groups, many nations, many cultures, many civilizations. What Shimon HaTzadik says is the world depends on Torah. Okay, so that's one claim. How do we feel about that? How essential do we feel it is that there be people engaged in Torah for the well-being of the world? What if the Torah, and certainly numerically, the Torah could be considered an endangered species these days? What if the Torah disappeared? Would the world collapse?
It depends on your conception of Torah, I think.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think of Torah as not just the religious text, but all the laws that underwrite science and the universe and physics and everything's Torah. So the whole universe depends on Torah. If this universe wouldn't exist, if these the physics wasn't set up this way, it's like Einstein said, the universe is a million dials, all precisely set to exactly the right numbers to have life. So to me, that's part of Torah. That's part of laws. The laws of the universe are part of the laws from God. So
what isn't Torah?
Something that's not set by God. I don't know. That's a harder question, actually.
Well, because I'm saying
it's like that saying, I know it when I see it.
It's very, very broad. Yeah. So if it's so broad, in what sense is it actually being definitive, defining, delineating? It ends up encompassing everything.
Well, if you think of Torah as laws, as a computer program, as it were, or as everything that is issued that causes everything to work and to function, is the order itself is what comes from God. The anti-entropy, the organization of mass into organization. That's different than just chaos.
Okay.
Chaos is not Torah.
First Lynn, and then Leah wants to say something.
Building on what John just said, I heard once, eons ago, that a Buddhist, when they have a near-death experience, does not meet Jesus Christ. A Jew does not meet the Buddha. I think spiritual practice and a guide for spiritual practice is very important to us in this world, but also to us for looking ahead at whatever happens when this world ends, which I, of course, have been thinking about a lot lately. I wonder why. But I think that the Torah is a book
you should do that more.
Yeah, I think the Torah is a book of spiritual practice, and it's like going to the gym and exercising. We need it for our well-being.
Okay, thank you. Leah, you wanted to say something.
Am I unmuted?
Now you're good.
You asked what if there was no Torah? What if the whole world abided by the laws of the Torah and the wisdom of the Torah? I just what then?
So that would be the opposite direction, right? And to a certain extent, actually, John is arguing that that's really what the world is doing.
Yeah.
So otherwise, there would be complete chaos and everything would fall apart. So it's kind of self-definitional. It's almost tautological.
But the idea of things not falling apart is hard to accept if you just look at what's happening today. Things do look like they're falling apart.
Okay, so I'm going to push again for a more specific kind of concept of Torah. And before I do that, Sarita, yeah.
So I actually wanted to say that to me, I see this as very specific. And I maybe building on what Lynn said, that we have our particular set of guiding principles, as it were. The foundation for Judaism is the Torah. I think we can, however, recognize that other religious groups, other groups have their sort of foundational documents, and there's undoubtedly commonalities among them. But I don't see this as universal. And if this is being written by somebody who was experiencing sort of the world opening up, then that person, right, Simone was perhaps confronting that, gee, there's all these other people, there's this wild world out there. What does it take for us to exist as a people? And so I see this as more specific.
That's it. That's interesting. If I may say, the translation that I have from a book called The Ethics of the Sages, edited by Rabbi Rami Shapiro, translates Torah as wisdom.
Okay.
And in his commentary, fairly getting a long paragraph about that, it's clear that this author is this editor rather is talking in universal terms, in terms of opening up one's mind to, I guess, to the other, to otherness. In any case, that's the translation that he has, wisdom.
Okay, so there are people raising their hands. I want to just, remark based on that. That comment of Rami Shapiro is directly addressing this question and addressing it in a certain way. No, I don't want to be very specific and particularistic about Torah. I don't buy that the world needs the particularistic aspects of studying Torah, that somebody needs to actually study Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. No, it's about wisdom with a capital W. Okay, Craig wanted to say something. Jen wanted to say something. Craig, you go.
I mean, I think this goes way back to really our foundation. God created the universe, created everything. He created Adam and Eve, and that didn't work out so well. And then, things went on, and to the generation of Noah, that didn't work out so well. Ultimately, God chose this family. He chose Abraham and his descendants, and he said to him, you will be a blessing. All nations will be blessed by you. And what was the reason for us being chosen was specifically so we could receive the Torah. I think without the Torah, the world does descend into absolute chaos. And again, I see Torah more as teaching. This is the way you're supposed to behave. This is what you should do. Everything, the order of the world depends on it. Otherwise, it's chaos. It's tohu v'bohu all over again.
Okay, Jennifer.
I actually, in a particular way, I think that I am a pluralist also, as other people have mentioned, like Sarita, the different religions, which all have brought worthwhile things, but we haven't all brought the same things exactly, however much we have in common. And the Torah is historically linked to, it goes through all the way up to our Constitution. There's like definite links to how we view law. And it's not only the Torah, we got some from the Romans too, and et cetera, but it has been an enormous influence on Western civilization, and some of non-Western, like through Islam and such. So it's without it, I can't even imagine what our world would look like, because so much was influenced by it, directly or indirectly, that we don't have a way of undoing all those. Yeah, we don't have a way of like unseeing all the connections, or even like untangling rather all the connections. So I think like the Torah specifically, and the way the Jews studied it, has been enormously influential, and I can't imagine what we would have without it. Moving on, I know a lot of people who would acknowledge, yeah, that's true. We got a lot of great things from the Torah, but we took the good things we can, and now we're moving on without religion altogether. I don't know how I feel about that. So I think we would lose something very valuable in throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So I don't quite agree with that, but I think I understand in this day and age, in the age of Trump being the religious hero for so many people, and other irreputable people, I get where that argument is coming from. So,
okay, thank you, Nick. You didn't unmute yet. Nope. It's on the bottom there, right? I mean, come on, you're a techie.
Put your mouse over the screen, and
there you go.
It opens up.
Okay,
right.
Sorry about that. Yes, I think I think what Jennifer just said is right on. I mean, I think we almost take for granted the life and the value of the Torah in our daily life. It gives us a path living, and now suddenly we have a world figure who doesn't have that as a reference point at all, and so we can begin to see what it would look like without the Torah, and it's a frightening picture.
Okay. Anybody else raising their hand? I think that okay.
I'm always a little uncomfortable with the idea that we have some kind of monopoly on the truth, and that the Torah is for the that it outranks everything else. I'm always uncomfortable with those kinds of ideas.
Right. So this is part of the stickiness that I wanted to bring up. To put things historically, Shimon HaTzadik, wherever he is, broadly speaking, he's within that time when Hellenism is sweeping the world, sweeping the Western world, and getting into the middle reaches of the Eastern world. And one of the strongest messages of the Hellenistic onslaught was, this is the future. We are what the world is about. And either you join us or you will be part of consigned to the dustbin of history. And it was a very, very, very successful project, and it influenced the entire world. The really strange thing is how little Judaism actually also influenced the entire world, as many people have mentioned in our conversation. But Jews have constantly, since that time and to this very day, been challenged to relinquish their Judaism for the sake of the world. And this has been a mantra by every group, every nation, every civilization that the Jewish people has found themselves part of. Even in modern times, after the religious control of the church was loosened in the Western world, France was the place where the emancipation started. We talked about this in other times with Napoleon and so on. For the Jews as individual people, everything. For the Jews as a nation, nothing. This was the guiding principle of the French Enlightenment. In the left today, there's a very, 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 very strong thread that goes back to 100 years ago or more, which said that if you really want to be part of the world, the revolution that's going to fix the world, you have to give up your Judaism. You have to give up everything that makes you separate and particular. So the push, and of course that's what Hanukkah is about. Hanukkah, the struggle of Hanukkah was about a Hellenistic, 164 BCE, a couple of generations or more after Shimon HaTzadik, where the push outside the Jewish community by Antiochus, the emperor, but within the Jewish community as well, was, hey, it makes no sense anymore to be this backward particularist people when there's this amazing universal civilization that's developing that we need to be part of. And again, I think that this is a very, very, very strong tradition, or a very strong stream of thought that occurs down to the present day. I just saw not too long ago, a week or so ago, there was one of these, perpetual survey things about what's the effect of the pandemic on people's faith. Has your faith gotten stronger? Has your faith gotten weaker? Have you become a person of faith more than you used to be, or less, or no change? So there's I don't remember all the statistics about everybody else, but unsurprisingly, American Jews are the least of all of the groups that were surveyed that found that their faith was strengthened, right? Because we've developed this kind of very paradoxical accommodation with this drumbeat of pressure from the outside world, where on the one side we're going to be, leave me alone. I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to be a Jew if I want to be. And on the other hand, I'm going to empty out the content of what my being a Jew is, so as not to get in the way of functioning in the world. So I want to insist, Shimon HaTzadik is not talking about Torah in some kind of universal terms. He's talking about Torah as Torah. He's talking about Torah as a Jewish, particular, specific way of life. And we're going to get to, practice and so on in the other two terms. He's talking about delving into wisdom, but the wisdom of Torah, the wisdom that is specific to Torah. The idea that you need to study the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, and Rebecca, and Rachel, and Leah. You need to study the laws of the sabbatical year, and not just affirm in general, we should all be very nice to each other, and we should treat each other nicely, and we should be, responsible stewards of the world. You can boil down all of the wisdom of the Torah into very simple, pretty generic, almost cliches. What the value is of the particular, of the specific way that the message gets across. What's the value of the particular way that we're supposed to behave to express those values? That's problematic. So I also want to say, back to John's point, when the world pushes you to give up what you want, a natural response is, are you kidding? What I have is everything. And the idea of trying to maintain a claim of monopoly, we are the only ones who get it. We are the only ones who have the truth. We are the only ones who are close to God, is a huge temptation. And it definitely has found a place in Jewish tradition. Over the centuries, over the millennia, there have definitely been Jews who have felt only the Jews have the truth, only the Jews have the power to keep the world going. It's Torah and nothing else. But that's not a necessary conclusion. And I used the word endangered species before. When we think about ecology and we think about how the world is knitted together, it's not knitted together by one generic kind of cell or one generic kind of piece of reality. Jen mentioned it, and other people. Reality is made out of a lot of very distinct pieces that somehow or other miraculously lock together. And to say that, if we don't have elephants in the world, will the world fall apart? It would be I would think it would be terribly tragic. But maybe it would actually fall apart. I don't know. We don't really know what the ecological, the world economy depends on. If you pull out that one piece, will everything else eventually just crash into each other? But Shimon HaTzadik is claiming if you pull out Torah from the mosaic or from the thread, the web of reality, then things are going to start spinning, out of connection and out of control. At least
Rabbi,
that. Yeah, Sarita.
So I wanted to respond
we have to stop
to John.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say a little bit. So I do think that Shimon is talking to Jews, not talking to everybody. But it's interesting because at the same time where Jews are almost told, why don't you assimilate? Why don't you give up being Jewish and join everybody else? We also see a pattern where our practices and our values get adopted by other groups. So, Passover, Pesach. And I remember reading at one point a couple of years ago how there were groups who were really looking at Shiva practices and and making that, looking at that as universal. And I think it's a wonderful thing.
Hold that point because we're over time already.
Okay.
The next session has to start. But I'm sorry to say that next week we'll continue on Mishnah 2 and not go into the next Mishnah yet. Okay?
Fine by me.
Hold that point and come back to it next week, please. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yashikar.
Stay safe, everybody.